My name is Beatrice Dubois, and for 17 years, my world was a small, carefully tended garden. I lived in Stillwater Creek, a town nestled in a valley where the mornings were often draped in a soft, silvery mist, and the scent of pine and damp earth was a constant comfort. Our house, a two-story home with a sprawling oak in the front yard, was my sanctuary. I had curated every corner of it, from the sun-bleached linen curtains in the living room to the chipped ceramic mugs we drank our morning coffee from. My husband, Julian, was a man who seemed as solid and dependable as the oak tree itself. He was a partner at a regional architecture firm, a job that he said required long hours and frequent travel, but provided us with a life of quiet comfort. Our son, Samuel, who was 13, was the rarest flower in my garden, quiet, thoughtful, and possessing an old soul's wisdom that sometimes startled me. He had my eyes but Julian's contemplative nature, and he spent most of his time in his room, surrounded by books and half-finished sketches of fantastical cities. My life was measured in predictable, gentle rhythms: the hum of the dishwasher, the weight of a book in my lap, the sound of Samuel's pencil scratching against paper, the low rumble of Julian's car pulling into the driveway at the end of the day. I had willingly stepped away from my own career in landscape design to cultivate our family life, a choice I had never regretted. I believed I was nurturing something beautiful, something real. That belief was the soil in which my entire life was rooted. It started like any other quiet Saturday morning, the kind where the house sighed in contentment and I finally had time to breathe. Julian had left before dawn for what he called a strategy summit in the city, a last-minute affair that was apparently crucial for a new project. Samuel was upstairs in his room, the door closed, lost in one of his worlds. The silence, usually a balm, felt heavy that day, so I decided to tackle a task I'd been avoiding for months: organizing Julian's home office. He always discouraged me from tidying it. "It's organized chaos, Beatrice," he'd say with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Client confidentiality, you know." But the door was ajar, and the sight of overflowing bins and dusty surfaces pricked at my sense of order. The room smelled of stale coffee and neglected paperwork. I began with his broad mahogany desk, creating neat stacks of papers and tossing out crumpled napkins and empty wrappers. It was a mechanical, soothing task. Then, my fingers brushed against the bottom drawer, the one that always seemed to stick. I gave it a firm tug, and it slid open with a groan. Beneath a stack of outdated financial reports and a tangle of old charging cables, my eyes caught on something out of place. It was a sleek, silver envelope, its paper shimmering with a pearlescent finish. It wasn't a bill or a business correspondence. It felt personal, intimate. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. My hand hesitated, suspended in the air above it, a silent debate waging within me. Then I picked it up. It was unsealed. There was no name on the front, no address. It was simply there, waiting. With trembling fingers, I slid out the contents. They weren't documents. They were tickets. 2 first-class airline tickets to Florence, Italy. Departure in 2 weeks. Tucked behind them was a reservation confirmation for a boutique hotel called Villa del Fiume in Fiesole, a picturesque village perched in the hills overlooking the city. The booking was for a romance package, a hillside suite, daily gourmet breakfasts, a private wine-tasting tour. I scanned the details, my mind refusing to process the words. Private terrace with city view. Couples massage. A week of curated intimacy. My breath hitched as my eyes found the names on the booking. The first was Julian Dubois. The second passenger was listed as guest of J. Dubois, the space for the name conspicuously, painfully blank. I sank into his leather office chair, the springs sighing under my weight. The rhythmic ticking of the wall clock sounded like a hammer against an anvil. "It's a surprise," a small, hopeful voice whispered in my mind. "He just hasn't put my name in yet. It's for our anniversary." But our anniversary wasn't for another 4 months. The hope flickered and died. A cold dread seeped into its place. Footsteps padded softly on the hardwood floor outside the office. Samuel appeared in the doorway, his brow furrowed with concern. "Mom? Are you okay?" You look pale. Instinctively, I flipped the tickets and confirmation face down on the desk. I'm fine, sweetie. Just taking a little break from cleaning. He walked into the room, his gaze sweeping over the desk before landing on the silver envelope. He tilted his head, his expression unreadable. Are those the tickets for the Italy trip? The blood drained from my face. I could only stare at him, my throat suddenly tight. What did you say? He pointed a slender finger at the envelope, his gesture calm and certain. I saw them on Dad's laptop last week. They're for him and Aunt Genevieve, right? My world, the carefully tended garden I had spent 17 years cultivating, tilted on its axis. Aunt Genevieve. The name echoed in the silent room. I looked at my son, whose gaze was clear and steady. There was no malice in his voice, only a quiet statement of fact. Samuel, I managed to whisper, my voice hoarse. How do you know that? Samuel shrugged, a gesture so casual it was jarring. He wasn't guessing. He wasn't trying to be cruel. I heard Dad on the phone with her. And I saw some of the planning emails. I saved them, he said, his voice dropping slightly. He then looked directly at me, and his next words sent a fissure through my already crumbling reality. I have a surprise for you, Mom. A surprise. The room felt like it was shrinking, the air growing thin. My hands began to shake, but I fought to keep my expression neutral, for his sake. Samuel, what kind of surprise? He offered me a small, sad smile. Don't worry, he said, his tone impossibly calm. You'll see. He turned and walked out of the office, as if he'd just commented on the weather, leaving me in the suffocating silence. I sat there, frozen, my fingers clenching the edge of the desk, the smooth, cool silver of the envelope a toxic presence in the room. Julian and Genevieve. A romance package. And my 13-year-old son, my quiet, gentle Samuel, saying, you'll see. I wasn't sure what terrified me more, the trip my husband was planning or the secrets my son was keeping. Sleep did not come that night. Every time my eyes drifted shut, the image of the silver envelope burned behind my lids. I saw the empty space where my name should have been. I saw Samuel's face, not of a child who had stumbled upon a secret, but of a sentinel who had been standing guard for far longer than I knew. I lay perfectly still, listening to the soft, rhythmic sound of Julian's breathing beside me. He was a stranger, a landscape I thought I knew intimately, now revealed to be utterly foreign. I wondered if he dreamt of her. Did his conscience even stir as he lay beside me? The betrayal was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making each breath a conscious effort. The next morning, I moved through my routine on autopilot. I made oatmeal with cinnamon and walnuts, just as I did every Sunday. When Julian came downstairs, he kissed my temple, his lips brushing against my skin like a ghost. Morning, love, he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. He was completely oblivious, cocooned in his own deceit. He left for an early tea time with a client, another casual lie that now felt sharp and deliberate. As soon as I heard the crunch of his car's tires on the gravel driveway, I called Samuel to the kitchen. He came down a few minutes later, holding the worn sketchbook that was his constant companion. He sat at the small wooden table, his expression somber. The morning sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing between us. Samuel, I began, my voice barely above a whisper. Yesterday. What you said about the tickets and about Genevieve. He met my gaze without flinching. I knew you'd find them eventually, he said. I've known for a while. You heard them talking? He nodded, setting his sketchbook aside. Dad's been different for a few months. He smiles at his phone in that way he never smiles at us. And Genevieve, she started coming over more often, usually when you were at your book club or volunteering. He paused, choosing his words with care. I didn't like how she looked at him. How he looked at her. His voice was steady, devoid of the emotional turbulence that was churning inside me. It was the voice of a witness. I was in the hallway one night, he continued, his eyes fixed on a point just past my shoulder, as if replaying the memory. He was on the phone in his office, and he didn't close the door all the way. He was talking about Italy. He said, I can't wait to have you all to myself, away from everything. I remember it because we just studied Italy in our history class. I closed my eyes, the image sharp and painful. You spied on him? The question was weak, a last vestige of a world where such things would have been unthinkable. I had to, he said simply. I saw a message on his laptop screen once by accident. It was from her. It just said, counting the seconds. So I looked. He finally looked down at his hands, a flicker of guilt crossing his young face. I didn't want to hurt you, Mom. But I didn't want you to keep being lied to either. So I started saving things. Just in case. A wave of emotion washed over Minute anger, but a profound, aching love for this boy. My son, my child, had been shouldering this terrible secret alone, trying to protect me while I moved through my days, blissfully unaware of the cracks forming in the foundation of our lives. Saving things? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. What do you mean? He glanced toward the stairs, toward the sanctuary of his room. I'll show you. But not yet. I want you to be ready. It's a lot. His words carried a weight that no 13-year-old should have to bear. There was a strategy in his eyes, a plan. Samuel, what does ready mean? He took a slow breath. I've been documenting things. Not just emails. Other things. Recordings. He let that word hang in the air between us. You need to see it all at once, so you understand everything. But I promise, what I have will make it all make sense. A chill traced its way down my spine. This was not the act of a curious teenager, it was the careful, methodical work of someone building a case. He was not just trying to expose a secret, he was trying to arm me with the truth. I reached across the table and covered his small hand with my own. His fingers were cool to the touch. You have been so brave, I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. I am so proud of you. He looked up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. You're not mad. Mad? I shook my head, a sad smile touching my lips. Oh, sweetheart. I'm heartbroken. But not with you. Never with you. A small, tense breath escaped his lips. I'm going to get everything organized, he said, his resolve returning as he stood up from the table. When it's time, I'll let you know. But you have to promise me something. I looked at his serious face. What is it? Don't confront him. Don't do anything until you've seen what I have. Promise? I hesitated for only a second, then nodded. The path ahead was dark and uncertain, but for the first time, I was not walking it alone. I promise. He gave a single, firm nod, then turned and walked back to his room. And I sat in the quiet kitchen, the sunlight feeling colder than before, with the devastating realization that the clearest eyes in our house belonged not to me, but to my son. A few days crawled by in a state of surreal normalcy. I made meals, washed clothes, and exchanged hollow pleasantries with Julian. Each conversation was a performance, each smile a carefully constructed mask. Inside, I was a landscape of ruins. The love and trust one had felt for him had crumbled, leaving behind a desolate silence. I was living in the ghost of my own life. One evening, after Julian had gone to bed early, complaining of a headache, Samuel came to me. He was holding his laptop. Mom, he said quietly. Can we go to the garage? I followed him without a word. The garage was cold and smelled of gasoline and sawdust. Julian's sedan, a sleek, expensive car he cherished, sat gleaming under the single fluorescent bulb. It felt like a monument to his double life. Samuel walked to a dusty shelf behind a lawnmower and picked up a tiny black object, no bigger than a matchbox. I ordered this online a few weeks ago, he explained, holding it in his palm. It's a voice-activated audio recorder. I put it under the passenger seat. He looked at me, his eyes searching my face for judgment. I used my allowance. The reviews were really good. I could only stare at him, a mixture of awe and sorrow welling up inside me. My son, who should have been spending his money on video games or comic books, was instead investing in surveillance equipment to uncover his father's betrayal. He connected the device to his laptop, and a folder of audio files appeared on the screen. Just listen, he said, his voice soft. He clicked on a file dated 2 weeks prior. The sound of the car door opening was followed by a woman's light, familiar laughter. It was Genevieve. My stomach clenched. "Oh, thank God, let's get out of here," she said, her voice breathy. "I felt like your wife was staring right through me at dinner." Julian's voice, a low, intimate murmur I knew so well, replied, "She doesn't suspect a thing, Genevieve. She's too trusting. It's one of her best qualities. And one of her biggest weaknesses." The casual cruelty of his words stole the air from my lungs. I reached out and braced myself against the cold metal of the car. "Is everything still on for Italy?" she asked. "Everything is booked," he confirmed. "First-class tickets. The suite with the city view you wanted. A whole week where I don't have to be Julian Dubois, devoted family man. And what about Beatrice?" There was a pause, and then he chuckled. A dry, humorless sound. "I'll tell her it's a last-minute business trip. A conference in Germany or something. She'll buy it. She always does." Samuel paused the recording. The silence in the garage was deafening. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I didn't want you to have to hear that." I shook my head, unable to speak. He had called my trust a weakness. He had weaponized the very foundation of our marriage against me. I felt a new emotion beginning to smolder beneath the grief, a cold, hard anger. "Play the next one," I said, my voice thin but steady. The next file was from just 3 days ago. Their voices were softer, more conspiratorial. "Did you transfer the money?" Genevieve asked. "I moved another $5,000 this morning," Julian replied. "From the joint savings. I marked it as a materials purchase for the new project. She won't look twice at the statements." "Good. My consulting business is finally starting to look legitimate," she said with a laugh. "It's amazing what you can build with the right investment. It's our money, Genevieve. Our future. I've been building this nest egg for us for years." Samuel stopped the recording. I looked at him, my mind reeling. It wasn't just an affair. It was a long con. A calculated, financial deception that ran far deeper than a secret vacation. He wasn't just betraying me, he was stealing from us. From Samuel. "That's not the surprise, Mom," Samuel said, closing the laptop. His face was grim. "That's just the part you needed to hear. The surprise is for later." I looked from the laptop to my son's determined face. He wasn't just my protector, he was my strategist. He had been quietly gathering the stones that would, I now realized, either build me a fortress or bury us all. After hearing those recordings, the last vestiges of my grief hardened into a quiet, cold resolve. The man I had loved didn't exist anymore. Perhaps he never had. Julian had spoken of my trust as a weakness, a flaw to be exploited. He had no idea that he had just forged it into a weapon. The most insidious part of his deception was Genevieve. For years, I had known her as Genevieve Thorne, Julian's distant cousin. "She's on my mother's side," he'd explained early in our marriage. "We weren't close as kids, but she's the only family I have left in the state. It's important we stay connected." I had accepted his story without question. I had welcomed her into our home for holidays, birthdays, and quiet Sunday dinners. I had poured her tea, listened to her stories about her work as a freelance graphic designer, and even confided in her once about a minor disagreement I'd had with Julian. She had listened with a sympathetic ear, patting my hand and saying, "He can be difficult, Beatrice, but his heart is in the right place." The memory of it now made my skin crawl. The day after we listened to the recordings, I pulled out the old family photo albums. They were heavy with the weight of manufactured memories. I flipped through the glossy pages, my eyes searching. There she was at Samuel's 5th birthday party, smiling behind the cake. There she was again at our 10th anniversary dinner, raising a glass of champagne. She was a constant, smiling presence at the edge of our lives. Samuel came and stood beside me, looking over my shoulder. "You know what's weird," he said, pointing to a photo from a summer barbecue. "She's in all of our pictures, but there are no old pictures of her with Dad. From when they were kids." He was right. Julian had a small box of old family photos, faded images from his childhood. We'd looked through them together once. I remembered a specific photo. He was fond of a group of people at what he'd called a family reunion in Colorado. A teenage Genevieve was supposedly standing next to a woman he'd identified as their shared aunt. We found the box in the back of his closet. I pulled out the worn photograph. The image was grainy, the colors faded. But in the age of the internet, a picture holds 1,000 digital fingerprints. Samuel took a high-resolution photo of it with his phone and uploaded it to a reverse image search engine. The results appeared in less than 10 seconds. The image wasn't from a family reunion in Colorado. It was a stock photo. It was available for purchase on 3 different websites, titled 1990s Summer Cookout. The same photo was being used in an online advertisement for a brand of patio furniture. I stared at the screen, a wave of nausea rolling through me. It was all a lie. A cheap, flimsy, elaborate lie. The family connection, the shared history, the entire foundation of her presence in our lives, she had invented it all. He faked it, I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. He faked his own family. Samuel quietly placed his hand on my shoulder. Why? I asked, looking from the screen to my son's solemn face. Why would he go to all that trouble? Because if you didn't think she was family, Samuel said, his voice filled with a wisdom that broke my heart, you never would have let her get so close. He was right. A mistress can be kept at a distance, but a cousin is invited in. A cousin is trusted. She hadn't just been his lover, she had been his accomplice, infiltrating our home, our lives, our memories, under the guise of a blood relation that never existed. We spent the rest of the afternoon digging. Guided by the breadcrumbs from the audio recordings, we logged into our joint bank account. I had always let Julian handle the finances, trusting his expertise. It was a mistake I would never make again. Line by line, we scrolled through years of statements. I learned how to filter, to search, to follow the money. There it was, hidden in plain sight. Dozens of transfers, disguised as business expenses, contractor payments, and investment withdrawals. Small amounts at first, then larger and larger sums. Over the last 3 years, Julian had siphoned over $90,000 from our shared savings and investments into an account for a shell corporation named Thorn Consulting, Genevieve's company. He had been slowly, methodically bleeding our future dry to build one with her. He hadn't just given her his heart, he had given her our son's college fund. I sat back, the numbers blurring on the screen. The betrayal was no longer just emotional, it was a calculated, criminal act. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The grief was still there, a deep, aching wound, but now it was surrounded by a wall of cold, hard clarity. I looked at the albums, the fake photo, the bank statements. They were no longer just symbols of his deceit. They were evidence. Samuel was quiet, watching me. He knew I had crossed a threshold. The weeping, wounded wife was gone. In her place was a woman who was finally, terrifyingly, awake. That evening, as I tucked him into bed, he looked up at me from his pillow. "The surprise I told you about," he said. "It's for your birthday. It's in 2 weeks." "My birthday?" He nodded. I think it's the right time for it. You'll know what to do." I didn't press him for details. I just smoothed his hair back from his forehead and kissed him goodnight. As I walked out of his room, I knew he was right. My birthday would not be a celebration of the past. It would be the beginning of the future. The 2 weeks leading up to my birthday were the longest of my life. I moved through my days like an actor who had memorized her lines perfectly but had forgotten the emotion behind them. I was polite, distant, a ghost in my own home. Julian seemed to notice the change, but misinterpreted it as fatigue or moodiness. "You seem tired, Beatrice," he said one evening, barely looking up from his laptop. "Maybe you should plan a spa day." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. Samuel, meanwhile, was my silent co-conspirator. I would see a new determination in his eyes, a focus that was both unnerving and deeply comforting. He spent hours in his room, the soft clicking of his keyboard a secret Morse code that only we understood. He was preparing. The morning of my birthday arrived on a wave of gray, drizzly rain. Julian presented me with a bouquet of tulips, Their vibrant red a jarring slash of color in the muted landscape of my emotions. "Happy birthday, my love," he said, kissing my cheek. The gesture felt rehearsed, hollow. "I've made a reservation for us tonight at the Gilded Sparrow. And I've invited Genevieve to join us for a drink here first. I thought it would be nice for us all to celebrate." His audacity was breathtaking. He was bringing her here into our home on my birthday. A part of me wanted to scream, to throw the flowers in his face and unleash the storm of rage that was gathering inside me. But then I saw Samuel, standing in the doorway of the kitchen, give me a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Wait," his eyes said. "Not yet." So I smiled. It was the hardest smile I have ever had to produce. "That sounds lovely, Julian." "Thank you." That afternoon, Samuel and I prepared the living room. We didn't hang streamers or blow up balloons. The atmosphere was not one of celebration, but of quiet anticipation. We arranged the furniture to face the large television mounted above the fireplace. Samuel connected his laptop to the TV with an HDMI cable, tucking the wires neatly behind a bookshelf. He then handed me a small, simple remote with a single red button. "When I give you the nod," he whispered, his hand closing over mine for a second, "just press the button." I slipped the remote into the pocket of my cardigan, its cool plastic a small, solid piece of courage. At 7 o'clock, Julian came downstairs, dressed in a crisp suit, smelling of expensive cologne. Minutes later, the doorbell rang. It was Genevieve. She was radiant, wearing a silk dress the color of champagne and carrying a beautifully wrapped gift. She swept into the room, her laughter echoing off the walls. "Beatrice." "Happy birthday," she chirped, handing me the gift. "I hope you have the most wonderful day." "Thank you, Genevieve," I said, my voice even. "It's so good of you to come." I placed her gift on the coffee table unopened. Julian poured 3 glasses of wine, his movements smooth and confident. He raised his glass. "A toast," he declared, smiling at me. "To my beautiful, patient, incredible wife, Beatrice. The anchor of my life. I love you." The hypocrisy was so profound it was almost artistic. I raised my glass, my eyes meeting his over the rim. "Thank you, Julian," I said. "I think this birthday will be a memorable one. A time for new beginnings." Genevieve smiled, taking a sip of her wine. They were both so relaxed, so completely unaware that they were standing on a precipice. Samuel, who had been sitting quietly in an armchair, stood up. "Before we open presents," he said, his voice clear and strong, cutting through the strained pleasantries, "I have a gift I want to give Mom." Julian chuckled. "What is it this time, champ? A model rocket? A book of poems?" Samuel gave him a thin, cold smile. "Something like that," he said. He then turned his gaze to me. It was a look of profound trust, of shared resolve. He gave a single, deliberate nod. My hand, steady and sure, slipped into my pocket. I pressed the red button. The television screen flickered to life, bathing the room in its cold, blue light. There was no sound at first, just a title screen that Samuel had created. In simple white letters, it read, "The Julian and Genevieve Project." Then, the first audio file began to play. It was the recording from the car. Julian's voice filled the silent room, clear and damning. "She doesn't suspect a thing, Genevieve. She's too trusting. It's one of her best qualities. And one of her biggest weaknesses." Julian froze, his wine glass halfway to his lips. Genevieve's effervescent smile dissolved, replaced by a mask of disbelief. The audio continued, their voices weaving a tapestry of their deceit, the plans for Italy, the casual dismissal of my intelligence. The screen changed. A spreadsheet appeared, the one I had made with Samuel. It showed the bank statements, the highlighted transfers, the $90,000 funneled into Thorne Consulting. The numbers were stark, undeniable. Finally, the screen showed the stock photo, the fake family reunion side by side with the advertisement for patio furniture. The room was utterly silent, save for the hum of the television. Julian stared at the screen, his face ashen. Genevieve looked as though she had been turned to stone. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "I can explain," Julian finally stammered, turning to me, his eyes wide with panic. "Beatrice, this is not what it looks like." I looked at him, not with the fury he expected, but with a vast, empty calm. "Isn't it?" I asked, my voice quiet. "You called my trust a weakness. Perhaps you should have been more concerned with my son's intelligence." I turned my gaze to Genevieve, who was trembling, her champagne-colored dress suddenly looking cheap and gaudy. "You sat in my kitchen," I said, each word precise and deliberate. "You ate at my table. You built a business with money stolen from my family. Was it worth it?" She just stared at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hatred. Samuel walked over and stood beside me. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He put his small hand in mine, and I squeezed it tightly. The video presentation ended, and the screen went black, but the truth it had revealed was now a permanent fixture in the room, as solid and immovable as the walls themselves. Julian looked at me, then at Samuel, then back at me. The bravado, the confidence, the easy charm, it had all been stripped away, leaving behind a hollow, pathetic man. He had thought I was the one who was blind. He never realized that the person who saw everything was standing right beside him. The aftermath was not the fiery explosion I might have once imagined, but a slow, quiet demolition. The birthday presentation had been the controlled detonation. What followed was the methodical clearing of the rubble. The next morning, with Julian and Genevieve's stunned silence still hanging in the air of our home, I contacted a lawyer. I didn't just want a divorce, I wanted justice. Samuel's evidence was ironclad. The audio recordings, the meticulously documented financial trail, the fraudulent family historiette formed a narrative of gaslighting, financial abuse, and conspiracy that was impossible to refute. When my lawyer presented Julian with the portfolio Samuel had compiled, the fight went out of him. Faced with the threat of criminal charges for fraud, he agreed to all of my terms. The house, my beautiful garden that I had so carefully tended, was signed over to me. He would be required to pay back every cent he had funneled from our joint accounts into Genevieve's sham company with interest. He also agreed to significant child support and to fund a trust for Samuel's education that I alone would control. Genevieve Thorne, stripped of her fake identity and her illicit funding, vanished. I heard through the grapevine that she had left the state, her consulting business dissolved, her reputation in tatters. Julian lost his partnership at the architecture firm. The board of directors, upon hearing of the scale of his financial deception, asked for his immediate resignation. The man who had built his identity on a foundation of success and prestige was left with nothing. There was no dramatic courtroom showdown. It was all handled through quiet, tense meetings in sterile law offices. I saw Julian one last time, across a long, polished table. He looked diminished, his expensive suit hanging loosely on his frame. He tried to speak to me, to offer some kind of apology, but the words felt like pebbles tossed into a canyon. They made no sound, no impact. I just looked at him and felt a profound and weary pity. He hadn't just lost his wife and his home, he had lost his son. Samuel refused to see him. "Maybe someday," he told me, "but not now." I need time to forget the sound of his voice on those recordings. Months passed. Autumn bled into a cold, crisp winter. The house, once a stage for a lie, slowly began to feel like a home again. My home. Samuel's home. We fell into a new rhythm, one built on honesty and quiet companionship. I went back to school online, finishing the landscape architecture degree I had abandoned 17 years earlier. I started a small business from my home office, the same office where my world had fallen apart. I designed gardens for people, creating small pockets of beauty and order. It was healing work. I learned to manage my own finances, to read a prospectus, to build a budget. I found a strength in my own competence that I never knew I possessed. My trust was no longer a weakness, it was a resource I now gave out carefully, starting with myself. One mild spring afternoon, almost a year after that fateful birthday, Samuel and I were in the backyard, planting a new garden bed. The sun was warm on our backs, and the air smelled of fresh soil and blooming daffodils. We worked in comfortable silence, the scrape of my trowel and the snip of his shears the only sounds. A car pulled up in front of the house. It was Julian. I hadn't seen him in months. He got out and stood uncertainly on the sidewalk, not daring to walk up the path. He looked older, tired, but there was a stillness to him I hadn't seen before. Samuel stopped his work and looked at me. I looked at him, my heart aching for the boy who had been forced to grow up too fast. "It's okay if you want to go inside," I told him gently. He shook his head. "No," he said. "I'm okay." He stayed where he was, a few feet behind me, a silent, supportive presence. I walked to the edge of the lawn. Julian didn't move closer. "Beatrice," he said, his voice quiet. "The garden looks beautiful." "I'm rebuilding it," I said. He nodded, his gaze falling to the ground. I know that an apology is meaningless. I know I can't fix what I broke. But I needed to say it. "I am sorry. For everything." He looked up, and for the first time, I saw not deceit or panic in his eyes, but a deep, hollow cavern of regret. "You were right about Samuel. He is smarter and stronger than I ever deserved." I listened, and I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The pain had faded to a dull, silvery scar. He was just a man who had made a series of terrible choices, a man I used to know. "Thank you for saying that," I said. It was all I could offer. He stood there for a moment longer, as if hoping for something more, some absolution I could not give. Then he gave a small, sad nod, turned, and got back into his car. As he drove away, I didn't feel triumph or bitterness. I felt peace. I walked back to my son, who was waiting for me by the half-finished garden bed. He looked from the retreating car to my face, his expression questioning. I smiled, a real smile that reached my eyes. "Are you ready to get back to work?" I asked. He smiled back, a weight seeming to lift from his young shoulders. "Yeah," he said. "Let's finish it." I knelt in the soft earth, feeling the life-giving soil between my fingers. I picked up a small, fragile seedling and gently placed it into the ground, patting the dirt around its base. The sun was warm, the air was sweet, and my son was by my side. My garden was smaller now, but the ground was solid, the roots were mine, and for the first time in a very long time, I knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever grew here would be real.